In the early years of a person's life, trying to find one's place is a daring adventure, with all the hormones, heartbreaks, existential crises, mental health issues, and loneliness. According to the World Health Organization, 1 out of 7 10 to 19 years olds experiences mental disorders, which demonstrates the adversity of bridging to adulthood. A coming-of-age novel authored by J.D. Salinger in 1951 titled The Catcher in the Rye is a strong narrative that emphasizes the alienation and mental health issues of the main character. As stated by Thiel in 2021, The Catcher in the Rye is Salinger's only full-length novel and is ranked 6th in the genre of coming-of-age next to Call Me By Your Name by Andrew Assiman, Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, White Teeth by Zadie Smith, and My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. Lomazov in 2019 noted that critics argue for a critical look at the issues faced by the American youth during the 1950s. Two of J.D. Salinger's short stories, I'm Crazy and Slight Rebellion of Madison, were published in the 1940s and was later revised and integrated as one which is The Catcher in the Rye, which was used as an educational resource in edge high schools. Before the novel was published, J.D. Salinger was of non-literary status, having written several stories without being noticed by critics or the general public. His very first boom was the novel itself that brought Salinger into the game. J.D. Salinger was known as the spokesman for the goals and values of the generation youth in the 1950s, as quoted in a book, Contemporary Literary Criticism by Davis in 1998. Widespread critics have argued that in The Catcher in the Rye, in the course of such a lengthy novel, the reader will be wary of a character such as Holden. On the positive side, Chicago Tribune reviewer Paul Engel quoted that the story was emotional without being sentimental, dramatic without being melodramatic, and honest without simply being obscene, emphasizing the author's ability to evoke emotion in a nuanced and natural way. Nothing else can make a person feel at home other than a story about facing adversity on a bittersweet journey of personal growth that ends with a fruitful resolution. Popular movies such as The Breakfast Club in 1985 directed by John Hughes and Forrest Gump in 1994 directed by Robert Zemeckis are great examples of a story. The Catcher in the Rye shares the same genre as the mentioned films, which is the coming of age. It refers to a work of fiction that focuses on the psychological and moral growth of the main character from youth to adulthood. According to Malatesta in 2018, the characters' stories of this genre customarily emphasize the inner monologue of the protagonist and are usually set in the past. The rule of thumb is that there has to be a development in the main character, as with the novel The Catcher in the Rye, is indeed a comedic coming-of-age novel that highlights the development of Holden Caulfield throughout the plot. The novel is composed of various themes, which are alienation, fear of change, and hypocrisy, that develop as the story progresses. Alienation is one of the central ideas that runs the story. In chapter 7, Holden had just finished a fist fight with Stradlater. He had a conversation with Ackley, and as he looked out the window, Holden felt uncomfortable and disconnected as he quoted, I felt so lonesome. All of a sudden, I almost wish I was dead. In page 48 of the book, which demonstrate that sets the stage for the theme alienation or loneliness of Holden. Hypocrisy, or as Holden referred to it as phony, according to Cambridge Dictionary in 2023, phony is an informal adjective that describes something that is not real or sincere. Holden speaks it a lot. For instance, when he was having a conversation with Mr. Spencer in Chapter 2, Mr. Spencer says, I had a privilege of meeting your mother and dad when they had their little chat with Dr. Thurber some weeks ago. They are grand people. And Holden quoted, grand. There's a word I really hate. It's phony. I could puke every time I hear it. In page 9, which shows Holden's hate for expressions that are not genuine. Fear of change is also one of the major themes that is explored in the novel. A sad example of Holden's fear of change is in the story is when he visits the Museum of Natural History. Holden adores the museum due to its stagnancy in nature. Every time he visits, the exhibits are always the same. He quoted, "Certain things should stay the way they are. You ought to be able to stick them in one of those big glass cases and just leave them alone. I know that's impossible, but it's too bad anyway." Which indicates the protagonist's fear of change growing up that adheres to the common features of the genre, the coming of age. Upon reading the novel, I was personally entertained by the writing style of J.D. Salinger, which embodies the personality of the protagonist. Holden Caulfield. The use of words such as lousy, swell, and curses like hell, damn, which are words that were predominantly used in the 1950s. Additionally, it took me 2 weeks of inconsistently reading the books since the language that is used in the book is average for a non-reader. Although halfway through the novel, I did not personally felt the excitement as I picked the book for a read since it is a very unlike of another coming-of-age classic novel I personally adored titled To Kill a Mockingbird, authored by Harper Lee, which follows the same linear narrative as The Catcher in the Rye. The reason why The Catcher is in the Rye is boring is because the novel is more of a character-driven story, showing Holden's internal thoughts and his journey to New York City in the majority of the novel than it being action packed. Moreover, the ending of the novel does not show a definitive resolution. It turned out that Holden was in a mental institution seeking help from a psychoanalyst, giving hints that he might go home and return to school. Nothing is certain. This left me unfulfilled as I finished the book. To make the long story short, 16-year-old Holden Caulfield is expelled from Pensy Prep and visits his sick history teacher, Mr. Spencer, who annoys him by discussing his failures back in his dorm. He learns his roommate, Stradlater, is dating a girl Holden likes. They fight, and Holden, losing, leaves for New York. He stays in a hotel, meets a prostitute but only talks to her, and later gets gowned by her pimp. He meets Sally Hayes for a date but upsets her with talking of running away. After drinking with an old friend, he sneaks home to see his sister, Phoebe, and shares his dream of being the catcher in the rye. Seeking refuge, he stays with Mr. Antolini, but leaves after feeling uncomfortable. He decides to live in solitude, but reconsiders after Phoebe insists on joining him. Instead, they share a happy moment at a zoo. The novel ends with the Holdens agreeing to attend a new school, signaling the end of his rebellion. In The Catcher in the Rye, some characters tend to be either loved or hated by the readers. I personally adore Phoebe Caulfield, Holden's younger sister, for her intelligence, compassion, and representation of innocence. She embodies the innocence Holden wishes to save and is one of the very few individuals to bring him real joy, which is in evidence when they share a tender moment on the carousel on page 210. I also love Mr. Antolini for his genuine care and life guidance for Holden, but then they also have a vaguely unpleasant moment on page 191. Conversely, characters such as Maurice, the elevator operator who robs and physically abused Holden on page 103. His actions validate Holden's mistrust of adults. Similarly, Stradletter, Holden's pompous roommate, inspires Holden's sorts of jealousy and insecurity, especially relating to his date with Jane Gallagher on page 31. J.D. Salinger's unique writing style makes his novel easy to read yet entertaining. He is distinguished by his conversational tone through the use of dialogue and focus on inner thought of a character like Holden. In A Catcher in the Rye, his writing often reflects the spoken language, emphasizing colloquial diction. This technique does not only bring characters to life but implies authenticity that resonates with the readers just as well as it did to me. Salinger's sentences typically vary in length, a technique that serves to mimic natural speech patterns. This variation helps to build rhythm and maintain a pace that feels reflective of actual human interaction, according to an article, The Writing Style of J.D. Salinger in 2024. In my personal experience reading the book, whenever I get to the zone of deeply interacting with the author, it feels as if I was having a conversation with Holman. The efficacy of J.D. Salinger's writing style was as effective as he intended it to be. giving the audience a chance to meet the characters in their own imagination. The Catcher in the Rye provides a critical perspective on post-World War II American culture through the eyes of Holden Caulfield. The novel reflects the anxieties and disillusionment of teenagers during the 1950s. Holden feels alienated and perceived most adults as phony, longing for authenticity and innocence. This longing is embodied in his younger sister, Phoebe, as Holden navigates the difficult transition from childhood to adulthood. He becomes increasingly isolated, struggling to find his place in a world that he views as insincere. The novel critiques the superficial and materialistic culture of the 1950s, where societal pressures often pushed people to conform and prioritize appearances. Through Holden's, through Holden's experiences, the story highlights the mental and emotional challenges of growing up and searching for genuine connection in a demanding environment. This exploration of themes such as alienation and fear of change and hypocrisy shows The Catcher in the Rye, a timeless and powerful critique of societal norms. My recommendation that will enhance this classic is to add events that will make the story engaging for the audience, such as thrilling scenes. Also, giving Holden a major character development will conclude the story in a resolved manner. I highly recommend The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger to anyone who enjoys introspective narratives and coming of age stories, which emphasize the personal growth of a protagonist. This novel offers a captivating adventure in the mind of Holden Caulfield, a teenager facing the pain of growing up, feeling of alienation, and a desire for authenticity in a world full of phoniness. The author's conversational tone makes Holden feel like a character brought to life that makes this book a timeless classic.